Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Dean Micetich writes in again. Hi, Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity. I've been listening to you talk about Kathleen Kennedy and how you cringe when people attack her. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. Or at least try not to. Rob, you've stated that Miss Kennedy has worked on many great films from the 80s and 90s, and she got her producing credit on Spielberg's film E.T. I'm not going to dispute that because her name is there in the credits for all to see. But what exactly did she do as a producer on those films? From what I understand, to get the credit of a producer, you can give money for the budget. That'd be the executive producer. Or being fully involved with the actual production of the film itself. So what was her role as a producer on those films? I have seen an interview with Steven Spielberg who talks about Miss Kennedy, where he states that when she was his PA and was meant to be taking notes during a story meeting, she would interrupt the meeting and say, "Why does he have to get the girl? Why not the dog?" I do not know what film that was for, but one thing is clear to me. She is not a creative person, which can only mean her administrative skills are top-notch, which is why she has been able to work her way up the corporate ladder and George Lucas through LucasFilm and all its subsidiaries, LucasArts, Skywalker Sound, Industrial Light and Magic, would be safe with her in charge. She has the skills to run a company. Now, we all know at this point in her career that Disney bought Lucasfilm and all of its subsidiaries from George and announced they were going to release a new Star Wars film every year, starting with the new trilogy. It is here where I see Miss Kennedy made her first and many of her biggest mistakes. When George sold Lucasfilm, he had given Disney an outline for the final 3 films of the Skywalker saga, and that he was to consult on all things Star Wars when needed. Now, I don't know if it was the executives in Disney or the marketing people that said you have to have all new characters in these films and not have original characters, but whoever it was gave the order to Miss Kennedy, and she threw out Lucas's outlines and started anew. If it was the marketing people that gave out these orders, well, we all know they're boneheaded morons that like to look at spreadsheets and ask the wrong people and the wrong questions when it comes to getting their data. As you found out, Rob, when making the features for the 20th anniversary Tron DVD, that is true. Now, I'm not going to go into the issues with the Star Wars films, as this has been covered to death, but needless to say, with starting afresh, she hired J.J. Abrams to make the first Disney Star Wars films with the mandate. I do know that she wanted him to do all 3 films, but he declined, as it would mean that he would be living in the UK for 6 years, minimum, working on those films, which he did not want to do. Man, I wish I could have been him. I would have been out the door. So they agreed on one. When J.J. was tasked with outlining the 2 films that followed his, I don't know, but he did set up a story element for the following films. We all know that got thrown out the window once Rian Johnson was hired to make The Last Jedi. I'm also going to take a guess and say Miss Kennedy had more creative control than she ever had on her previous films. Now, we know that even though she could bring in George Lucas to consult and make sure they're making the best Star Wars films they can, they only brought him in once for The Force Awakens and discarded his suggestions. It's speculation they had to bring him in for The Rise of Skywalker to help fix it. Rob, you have stated that studio executives used to watch the dailies of their films in production to see what was working and what was not. Did Miss Kennedy, who is being heavily involved with Star Wars, even do this with Solo? I find it hard that she was seeing all of this footage coming out daily and did not realize there's a problem with the film until it was 90% completed. Miss Kennedy is also the driving force behind the High Republic cross-media stories they are currently doing, which has gone down like a lead balloon and had not been well received so far. As I said, I don't think she is a creative person and should not be the driving force behind Star Wars. She should have hired her own Kevin Feige to run Star Wars once Disney wanted to start making more. Do you think when Disney bought Lucasfilm and Feige was in charge, he would have accepted the mandate for new characters to be the focus of these films? No, he would not. He would have had the original trilogy characters as the main characters and introduced new characters and have gotten past them and batten past them so they would be the focus of the second and third films. He might not have used Lucas's outlines for the sequel trilogy, but I'm sure he would have utilized George far more than he was with Kennedy. Finally, as stated, Miss Kennedy is the head of Lucasfilm and its subsidiaries. With the exception of LucasArts that was closed down when Disney acquired it, how are the other companies doing under her control? Are they being as innovative under her as they were under George? Over the last few years, you really don't hear much about these companies anymore. So, Rob, I've tried not to attack Kathleen Kennedy in this letter, but I do feel she should take a step back from Star Wars and bring someone in that knows what they're doing and let them run with it, while she gets her head down and deal with the administration of Lucasfilm, which seems more in line with her skills. Peace and long life, Dean. Dean, you know I love you, buddy, and I appreciate how much you've interacted with this community over the years. But I have to say, you just exemplified in this letter what I do not understand about all of fandom in regards to Kathleen Kennedy. And I mean this with all due respect. Why does everyone think they fucking know how producers work and the entertainment business works and how Kathleen Kennedy works? Everybody seems to know exactly how Kathleen Kennedy works on a day-to-day basis. And I find it odd. You know, I watch everybody. There's a lot of vitriolic commentary on the internet about Kathleen Kennedy and how she's not a creative producer and she's not this and she's not that. And I'm like, how does everybody think that they know this? I don't understand. I don't understand. Like I would not presume how to do brain surgery, and I couldn't even begin to remotely comment on how brain surgery is done. I wouldn't know, like, if you're cutting around a cranium, do you go left or right? No idea. I have no idea. I don't know at all. But since you brought it up, let's start. Let me just look here. Okay. I'm going to go to Kathleen Kennedy's IMDb profile, and I'm just going to look under her producer credits. She has 107. 107 producer credits. No, I won't read all of them. She was the producer of E.T. She was the executive producer of, well, let's just look here in general. E.T. producer, Poltergeist the associate producer, which makes sense because those were being made at the same time, and she was working on E.T. She was the associate producer of Twilight Zone the movie, which Spielberg directed a sequence for. She was the associate producer of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. She was the executive producer of Gremlins, The Goonies, Back to the Future, Young Sherlock Holmes. She was the producer of The Color Purple. She produced The Money Pit. She was the producer of Empire of the Sun. She was an executive producer of a lot of movies. She was the producer of Always, Spielberg's Always. She was the producer of Arachnophobia. She was executive producer of Joe versus the Volcano, of The Land Before Time, Inner Space, American Tail. Noise is Off, one of John's favorite comedies. She was the producer of Hook, which Spielberg directed, obviously. She's a producer, produced Jurassic Park. She was executive producer of Schindler's List. She produced The Bridges of Madison County for Clint Eastwood. She produced Twister. She produced The Sixth Sense. Those are not Spielberg movies. She produced Snow Falling on Cedars. She produced Seabiscuit. Anyway, I could go on, and she produced Lincoln. So anyway, here's the thing. Let me explain what a producer does of her ilk. If you're a producer that works with a director, all right, so they're making Empire of the Sun, right? They have to show the fall of Shanghai in this movie. Imagine that. How are we going to do that? A good producer who has to be, a good producer has to know a million different things. Like, okay, we have to have how many extras in this scene? Are we actually going to go to Shanghai and shoot, or can we find something that can double as Shanghai? We need a bridge. We need period cars. Where do we get all the period cars? How do we get all those hundreds of period costumes? What about all the props they have? Oh, wait a minute. How are we going to feed all these extras and make sure they have bathrooms when we shoot on those days? Producers have to be incredibly creative. And now, are they being creative in terms of storytelling? Well, in a way they are, because Kathleen Kennedy is thinking, okay, how many extras can we get away with? I'm reading the script pages. I've listened to Steven talk about what we're going to shoot. I know for a fact the way he moves the camera, we're going to need a lot more extras. He's not going to shoot in close-ups. There's going to be some big wide angles. We're going to need a lot of people. Can we augment those crowd scenes? This is back in the 80s with digital technology. Can ILM do it? I mean, the amount of decisions and the amount of foresight that a good producer has cannot be underestimated. Cannot be underestimated. And Steven Spielberg is one of the greatest directors who ever lived. The reason he kept working with Kathleen Kennedy is because she could anticipate what he wanted and knew how to make those things happen. Steven Spielberg doesn't have to be like, Kathleen, I don't know if we have enough extras. Kathleen Kennedy's got it handled. She already knows. It's not her job to say, well, I think metaphorically you should see Christian Bale understand, like when he sees the flash of the nuclear bomb go off, that he's watching the soul of Mrs. What's-Her-Face go up to heaven. That's not her place. I'm just going to say that Steven Spielberg is not in the habit of keeping people around him that do not add to his productions. He's not that way. And nobody in Hollywood is that way, really. Even your best friends, if they start to let you down, it's problematic. So the problem that people have had with Kathleen Kennedy is only about one thing, and it's Star Wars. And I think that what you have to remember is, how is it that Kathleen Kennedy can be responsible for all of these movies that everybody likes, and yet, I mean, she's been, I didn't like Steven Spielberg's The BFG very much, and she was the executive producer of that, but I wouldn't, it's not something, it's only Star Wars. The problems that people had with Kathleen Kennedy began in, not even with 2015, they began in 2017 with The Last Jedi. Isn't that amazing? And Solo, I guess. I mean, maybe before The Last Jedi, but it's basically all of the hatred from Kathleen Kennedy is coming from Solo. I mean, people talk about Rogue One. It's not just Kathleen Kennedy. There's a lot of blame to go around. And I would dare say that Kathleen Kennedy tried to make some really interesting hires. She tried to hire Lord and Miller. She tried to make it all work. And you know what? What you don't do is if it was probably the hardest decision of her life. She probably said no, and she had other people breathing in her ear like Lawrence Kasdan, who she'd known for 40 years. And it's like, this is not working. I can't even imagine what she was being put through. Plus, she has to deal with the higher-ups at Disney. So she's running a studio, and she's trying to be a creative producer. In her life, she's probably never had so much pressure put on her in her life. And so we don't like a couple of movies that she's made, and suddenly our entire childhood has fallen onto the shoulders of Kathleen Kennedy to give us something that we love. I don't understand why people don't go back and look into her filmography and see that this is a woman and a filmmaker that's worthy of respect. And it bothers me because I don't think it's really understood what she brings to the table, and it's always done by look, I love everybody. I love my fellow fans. I love my fellow YouTube pundits. But how many of them have ever actually worked on a film? And I mean worked on a film in a producerial capacity. And I mean no disrespect by that, but how many have? And yet, the way people talk, you'd think that everybody knows Kathleen Kennedy and knows exactly what she does on movies, has been into meetings or whatever. And people just haven't. I've never met Kathleen Kennedy. I've never been in a meeting with Kathleen Kennedy. I don't know. But I've been on set for an extended period of time on a lot of big, large Hollywood productions. $200 million Hollywood productions with a camera in my hand, running around talking to everybody that was involved in the production. I could ask any question I wanted to. Imagine what that was like for me for a year in Australia, where my job was literally to get out of bed every morning, go to the set of Superman Returns, and follow anyone and everyone around with a video camera while they're working and ask them what they're doing and how they're doing it. And when we were between takes or something, I went into producer Gil Adler's office and would talk to him. Tell me about how this movie works. And at night, when we were done shooting, I went into John Ottman's edit bay and I would sit and watch him cut. I mean, I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but that's what I spent years doing. How many people get that kind of an education? I unfortunately have not been able to apply any of that knowledge directing a second film. Since I've done all that, it's my great frustration. But yet people talk as if they have or that they know. I have to tell you, the idea, the being outside of the filmmaking process, unless you've been in it, or unless you've even if you've tried to make a short and get a short finish and all the things that entails, it's frustrating for me to hear people bitch and moan and complain about Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy is one of the most capable, one of the most knowledgeable producers who has ever worked in the entertainment business. Why? Because she's been working with some of the best people. David Fincher, Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, and yes, George Lucas. But it's not like she's working on the B movies that I worked on. I mean, she started working at a certain level and worked up her way up from there. This is what everybody does. Kevin Feige was a PA for Richard Donner. I mean, I just think we need to start giving her the benefit of the doubt as a producer. Now, the political agenda she might have and the force is female and all that, that's a whole different thing. But as a producer, she is demanding and deserving of respect. But I appreciate you writing in. And you know, Dean, I love you, man.